Welcome to East by West Farms, where we grow what we eat and we eat what we grow. In this video, I'm going to talk about water management at the farm. When you think about Texas, you think about hot and dry. Well, and that is true. It gets really hot here in summer and it's quite dry in summer. But it's also very wet. We get about 14 inches of rain every year, in average. And there are years where the rain is less, like last year, and there's years when the rain is more. Maybe this year we had a good start of the year. The problem is that the rain is not very evenly distributed. We have a lot of rain in winter and in spring, and we have very little rain when it's really hot, when we really need the rain, then it becomes really dry. The other problem is that during the last few hundred years, we've been cutting all the prairie, we've been plowing the prairie up, with the effect that the water runs off the slope into a creek and into the ocean eventually. So the water really doesn't stay on the property and doesn't have a chance to seep into the ground and give enough water for the plants to grow. Our goal is to slow the water down, keep it on the property as long as we can, give the rain the opportunity to seep into the ground so that the deep roots of the prairie plants can access the water and thrive and survive during the dry and hot summer months. One way would be to hire a contractor with some heavy equipment. That's very common for livestock, for cattle. Their cows need quite a bit of water. So pretty much all farms have a tank that's dug into the ground. We have clay soil, you dig a hole, it rains, the water stays. The only thing it takes is money and a contractor. The other way to do that is to dig a bunch of ponds on the property, put up swales on contour so that the water slows down and has time to seep into the ground and stay on the property and doesn't just run off and disappear. We actually have both methods. We do have a stock pond in the back of the property. We have fish in there. We have a video how Hein started stocking the pond with fish. But we also have smaller ponds that are mostly hand dug. I started digging ponds about 3 years ago, just after we moved in. There's a pond next to the barn that I'll show you in the video, and I have a few more ponds strategically located at specific location. So the way how to find the location where you want to dig a pond is you look where the water naturally wants to pool. It's been raining last night, it's actually been raining quite a bit last night, and the water naturally starts pooling right here in this area. That's, of course, is the place where I start digging. The next step would be to map out the contour, which will be the boundary of the pond. If you have ever dug a pond, you will ask, well, Chris, what are you going to do with all the soil that you dig up? There are two ways of dealing with the soil. If it's a pond that is on a high spot, on a depression, a high spot, you don't want to take the soil and make a berm around the pond because that prevents the water from flowing into the pond. So in that situation, I take the soil, put it in a wheelbarrow and make contour and make swales on contour somewhere around the property line. If the pond has a slope on one side and is kind of open on the other side, like a keyline pond, then I will use the soil to make a berm to prevent the water from flowing out of the pond. The first pond I want to show you is right here next to the garden, between the barn and the garden. I dug that pond right when we moved into the farm. That must have been August, I think 3 years ago. The idea was to catch the rainwater from the barn, from the gutters of the barn, and use it to water the garden. The pond is connected to a swale that runs along the property on contour, and the water really comes in here, so when it rains, this pond fills up pretty quickly. This pond was about 5 feet deep, and I made the sides square. The idea was that if I have square sides, the volume of the pond is maximum and the evaporation is not so much. That turned out to be a bad idea because the erosion of the soil makes the pond fill in and give a triangle shape in the bottom. We're not trenching the pond anymore because the pond is really close to the barn and we are a bit concerned that the foundation of the barn might shift. Let's get to the next pond, which is also in the garden, a bit on the right-hand side of where I'm standing right now. Right here is where I had a wet spot in the soil. That pond is the second pond I dug. I used the Harbor Freight tool trencher to dig it. The pond is about 6 feet deep. Now it's been raining quite a bit last night and the pond should be really full, but it is not. Theoretically, the water flows from my left down into this pond. I have a swale behind the pond. We have a bunch of swales and berms, small swales and berms in the garden. I think that the water is just getting directed towards the greenhouse and not towards the pond. So that's something we need to improve. Right? The pond should be really full at this point in time. We do have quite a bit of aquatic life in here. At night we've got frogs, we've got a bunch of insects here skimming on the water surface. And I'm sure we do have some snakes out here. That's all good, that's part of doing good gardening. And here's the most recent pond. That area has always been a wet spot. Every time it rained we had water collecting here on the surface. The vegetation was very different than the rest of the farm. So I started digging up that area with a shovel and it turned out it was a really good decision. Right now this pond is about 1 foot deep. The idea is to make that pond at least 6-7 foot deep so the water stays in there over summer when it dries out. I marked out the contour and you can see the markers right here, so it's not quite done yet. There's some wet spots here that I need to integrate in the pond and extend the pond in this direction. Now that pond keeps the water very well. That's probably the best pond we have so far. I guess the reason for that is that we leverage the natural contour of the area. There might actually be some water collecting on the upper end of the farm and coming out here. So in an ideal world, we would collect water uphill of the farm and the water goes through the ground, gets filtered through the ground and comes out here as a spring, and we have water all year round. So the next step is to dig that pond deeper. Next to the chicken coop is the duck pond. I started digging that pond during COVID when I was self-quarantining. It took me about 2 weeks to get that area established. The pond is about only less than 1 foot deep. And that's really been the first hand dug pond. So if it rains really hard, we've got water in here. The water evaporates or seeps into the ground after that and becomes dry. So I need to deepen that pond, make it, I would think 6-7 feet deep. Now this is the first real pond that I dug. I made a few mistakes. One thing is I didn't really read the area very well. Now I thought that the pond is sort of at a slope that has a slope in all direction. That really is not the case. The water really comes from camera right, flows into the pond, and then flows out. So that's the water flow. The thing I did wrong is that I took the dugout soil and put a berm around the rim of the pond. So it kind of blocks the water from flowing into the pond. Need to remove the berm, which is really a pain in the neck to do, because the tree started rooting into the soft soil of the berm. The ducks really love the pond. I mean, they take a bath in the morning, they take a bath in the evening, they dive here in the pond. We've got a few shorts on ducks in this pond having fun. This pond here is at the highest location of the farm. It's towards the south side of the farm. Our farm is sloped towards the north, so all the water runs down into a seasonal creek. The slope of the land here is about 3 to 4 degrees, so it's a very mild slope. In this exact spot, we always had a puddle of water. After it rains, there's always some water puddling up. So I started digging that up and made it into a pond. The water mostly runs from the left-hand side and a bit from the right-hand side, and it collects right here in the water. Now this pond here is about 1.5 feet. That's like 35-40 centimeters deep. I have a long way to go. My goal is to make that slope with sloped walls and make it 6 foot, maybe 2 meters, 2.5 meters deep. So there's still quite a bit of material that I need to excavate. It's good material because I do need to do a berm to protect the driveway from big runoffs anyhow. This pond is a really nice location because we have a mesquite tree that gives it shade. There is a cedar elm tree that's growing, and eventually the mesquite tree as a pioneer tree will go away, and we have a nice cedar elm tree providing shade around this pond. I'm not quite sure if I want to make this pond a little bit bigger. The contour starts going down towards this direction, so I might have to make a berm here. Eventually the goal is to have swales and berms so that the water slows down. In this video, I showed you how we manage water on our farm. The overarching goal is to slow down the water and keep the water on the property as long as we can. There are different ways to do that. We're using traditional method with shovels and wheelbarrows. There are other ways out there on YouTube. Our approach is more to work with nature, and to use the features in the landscape, enhance the features in the landscape to prevent the water from running off. Thank you for watching. If you like this type of video, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. And if you want to follow our journey with the East by West Farms, hit the subscribe button and you get a notification every time we post a new video.